In today's episode of Biz Jet TV, we're going to be talking about private jets in Africa. So we're going to talk about flying in and out of Africa. We'll talk about how many private jets there are in Africa, where they are, infrastructure, and what's the things looking like for the future. So, welcome to Biz Jet TV. If this is your first time, my name is Fabrizio. I'm the founder here of the channel. I'm an airline transport pilot and also an aviation professional and an aviation advisor. And I've been in this business for over 35 years. I learned to fly when I was a kid. I was 15 flying gliders, then 17 I got my first pilot's license, and off I went all the way up to the airlines, passing through the ranks of private aviation as well. I'm also the author of The Quantum Economy and a series of other books that you can find on Amazon. You can click on the link below to find out more about the quantum economy. And the quantum economy is something we talk about in this episode because Africa is talked about in my book, The Quantum Economy, as one of those emerging markets. Now, 15% of the world population actually live in Africa. So that's an interesting statistic there. Now, where are all the private jets in Africa? Well, we have South Africa is number one on the list with 418 aircraft, followed by Kenya with 137, and then Nigeria with 109. So this is where most of the private jet activity is. But we also have a series of emerging economies, apart from these three countries. We've got Angola, Uganda, Ghana, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So these are all places where private jet travel is on the increase as well. Now, what are the main economies in Africa? We've got oil, gas, mining, and tourism, but there also is another one which is not much talked about, but I do talk about it in my book, The Quantum Economy, and that's the fashion industry. Yes, there's lots of new fashion designers emerging out of different African nations, and you're seeing them now, their clothes and that, on the catwalks of Paris, Milan, and New York. You're seeing more and more of these African designers. So I say the new Giorgio Armani is coming out of Africa. It's not coming out of Italy. So, and this African music, there's a few other things that are emerging out of Africa. One of the things I'd like to mention is what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink. He's putting all these satellites in orbit. And if and I predict that the new cell phones in the next couple of years will all connect to Starlink. Now, what does this mean? This means that if you are in the middle of the Sahara Desert and you have your iPhone with you, you can actually talk to the world because it will be connected to the satellite. And by all the mobile phones being connected to satellite, this is going to connect more and more people. So the people in Africa, once they have a cell phone, they'll be able to connect to people all over the world. And this is going to open up lots more opportunities for African entrepreneurs to let people know what they're doing. So let's say you've got some young lady of 22 years old that lives in Kenya and she's designing clothes. She starts to discover the internet. She starts to put her stuff on Instagram, on TikTok, and somebody in Boston is going to see that and they're going to order a dress. And then they're going to wear the dress to the next party. Her friends are going to say, oh, wow, that's really cool. Where'd you get that from? And suddenly this young lady from Kenya starts having lots of business in the United States. And that's the power of the internet. And the power of the internet as an infrastructure which is, in the ethers, that infrastructure is important. So now with Starlink, and more satellites being put in orbit, more and more people are going to be able to have this technology. And as I said, the next mobile phones are all going to be satellite phones. And so you'll be able to be connected from anywhere, even in the middle of the ocean, in the middle of the desert, wherever you are in the world, you'll be able to speak to your friends and family and business associates. So let's have a bit more look here at private aviation. So if you're flying your private jet and you're going down to Africa for business, which is recommended, you go down there with your own private jet. The things people think about is, can I park my jet safely? Is there a hangar where I can house my jet? But, you've got to get there first, so you need the permits. And getting permits for certain African nations can be quite a tedious and complicated exercise. So it's important that you either have someone in-house that knows the landscape and knows who to call, knows the different procedures in the different countries, or you're using a company that can help you do that, but that company have to know their way around Africa. And that's really, really important. One thing I always do when I fly in and out of Africa is always carry an envelope with cash on the airplane, because we find that, as soon as you land, if you start giving out tips to people, things start to flow. And you start to get answers to the questions that you may have, like where can I park the airplane? How do I get to the hotel downtown? You got a car or driver? Can we hire somebody to guard the airplane? All these things You can plan them before you get there, but in order for them to actually happen, you need to start dishing out the cash. It's just the way things work down there. So it's important to sort of understand that. So if you are thinking of buying a private jet and you're going to be, hiring crew and you're going to be flying in and out of Africa, you want to make sure that the crew that you hire, can think on their feet. And as I always tell people, yes, we do talk about private jets on Biz Jet TV. Yes, I do help people buy private jets. That's what I do. You can contact me, hire me on a retainer fee, and I will go out there and find the best airplane for you. But as I always tell everybody, the pilots are more important than the plane, because you can be down there with a nice, shiny new Gulfstream G700, but if your pilot doesn't know the landscape, if your pilot doesn't know what to say, how to say, and organize things, that airplane could end up, sitting there for a few days without you getting a permit to fly out. So, it's important, the flight operations around the airplane, and so the people are more important than the plane, okay? Your people will keep the plane safe, they'll keep it flying, they'll keep it fixed, they'll keep it parked in the right place, they'll get all the permits, etc., etc. This is really, really important. I mean, I had a situation a few years ago as we were leaving out of Milan, Italy, and we're going down to one of the Greek islands, and there was an 8-hour slot, and my boss was freaked out. He said, "Oh, we can't wait 8 hours. We need to get down there." I said, "Okay, let me make a phone call." Now, I was lucky enough. I'd worked teaching air traffic controllers English. So I made a phone call to one of my former students who happened to be in charge of one of the air traffic control centers in Italy. And I mentioned the problem I had. He said, "Wait a minute, I have a friend in Brussels. Let me just make a call." 5 minutes later, I get a phone call, said, "You no longer need it. You no longer have a slot. You can go when you want." And so I solved the problem in 10 minutes. How did I do that? I knew the right people. So having, a pilot that's got a good network, that knows what to do, is really, really important and can save you a lot of time, especially when you're going to places like in Africa. You want to make sure that, your team's prepared and they know how to play across that landscape down there, because there's lots of opportunity going to be coming out of Africa. I mean, they're talking about 7 out of 10 of the fastest growing economies in the world are actually coming out of Africa. And as I said before, 15% of the world's population. So there are opportunities there now, but there's going to be a lot more opportunities for the future. As I said before, as more and more people acquire cell phones and they start using them, connecting with the satellite, they're going to start connecting with people around the world. There's going to be a lot more opportunity to do business there. And so why not? If we can make more money, if we can create more jobs, we can distribute this money to more people because they're delivering value. If these young people in Africa can get an education online, because one of the other problems that's happening with aviation in Africa, there aren't enough pilots. But this is not only an African problem, it's a problem that's happening in the US right now, it's happening here in England, it's happening all over the world. There is a pilot shortage. But in Africa in particular, because they've got an aviation sector which is growing a lot faster than anywhere else, the need for pilots down there is even more. So what a lot of private jet guys are doing, they're hiring people from Europe on a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 1 week on, 1 week off. That way they can get people that don't have to relocate their whole family down to Kenya or South Africa. They can just commute themselves. That's one way of doing it. But what really needs to happen is we need to create an infrastructure so that young people in Africa can receive an education, become pilots, mechanics, and be able to contribute to the aviation sector. So that's something that the various countries need to be doing. And we see what's been happening in India, and India's kind of an example there, where they've been building more airports, more infrastructure. They've been helping young people who want to become pilots to get the qualifications and help them with scholarships and things like that. It's the same thing needs to happen in Africa, because we need more infrastructure. If I'm going to fly my private jet somewhere down in to Angola, I want to be able to park it in a hangar for 3 days while I'm there. Do you have a hangar? No, we don't. Well, then maybe I'm not going to go. So that's another important thing. Building hangars, airports, and that. And what they did in India is there were about 200 landing strips that had been built by the British Army during the Second World War. They've revamped a lot of those sites now and turning them into airports. But Africa, there's lots of space. But the thing that's going to change the African landscape from an aviation perspective will be flying drones and also flying these electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. So if we have the ability to land and take off, and they're looking at using airships as well, we can land in a field next to the mine pick up 50 kilos of gold, and then fly them to the airport or the port, which is maybe 50 kilometers down the road. So that's certainly something that's going to happen. The problem with that is, you need to make sure that your drone or your eVTOL is protected, because there's lots of pirates down there. They try and shoot these vehicles down and then grab the gold. I was talking to a friend of mine a few months ago, and he was talking about a friend of his that has a mine down in Ghana, and every time they transport the gold, they transport it on a motorbike, and the guy driving the motorbike has a machine gun, and he drives this motorbike through the jungle, has to shoot a few people on the way to get the gold to the port. And so that's what he was telling me they were doing, is using motorbikes. Helicopters have been used and are used, but it's quite expensive to run a helicopter back and forth. So that's why they're looking into drones, these larger drones, which are run on electricity. They don't require a man to fly it, or the electric vertical takeoff and landing will require initially a man, but there are some unmanned vehicles like this. So I'd say that's certainly something which will help, because that way you don't need to build a runway. You can just have, like a helipad and land there and take off. That's something that's certainly going to help. And I think, these vehicles will flood the market, which is going to be good, and it's going to help regions like Africa or the islands of Indonesia and the Philippines, getting stuff from one island to the other instead of going by boat. Fly 3 boxes of bananas on a drone from one island to the other. That kind of thing is certainly something which will help. So technology is going to help African aviation develop because of the electrical vertical takeoff and landing capabilities of a lot of these new flying machines and cell phone connections via Starlink through the satellite. And so that's going to fuel aviation. So if you're thinking of, flying to Africa on a private jet, it's a great idea. You can get a lot more done. Also, there aren't many airline connections, and you'll be wasting a lot of time if you're trying to do your trip to 3 or 4 different African countries. With the airlines, it's probably going to take you a couple of weeks. With a private jet, it's a few days. And that's really where the advantage is, getting into these emerging economies while they are just starting to emerge and riding that wave, as well as helping the people locally to develop. You hire some local people, you'll give jobs to these people, you'll improve their local economy, as well as being able to export their product to your country and make a good margin on it. So that's kind of my take here on the African aviation scene. So I'd like to hear your comments below. What's your experience with African aviation or doing business in Africa? And if you want to buy an aircraft, I can certainly help you. You can reach out to me and we can schedule a one-to-one call. And if you haven't got a copy of The Quantum Economy, just click on the link below and get a copy of the book. Subscribe to Biz Jet TV and check out this other video we did recently about how US universities are actually helping students get scholarships. And the key factor in helping them get these scholarships is actually the private jets. You want to hear this story, so go and check that one out. And that's all from Fabrizio here on Biz Jet TV, and I'll see you on the next one.